Hello friends. Let's talk about some common board thinking errors and why they keep repeating. Boards rarely fail because they make poor decisions. Much more often, they fail because they answer the wrong question too quickly. What looks like a decision-making problem is often a thinking problem, specifically a problem of misdiagnosis. Boards are probably familiar with the three classic modes of governance. There's fiduciary work, the oversight, assurance, and risk management. There's strategic work, plans, priorities, direction. And then there's generative work, sense-making and framing. In theory, boards move between these modes fluidly. But in practice, many boards oscillate between oversight and strategy and rarely spend enough time in the generative space. Not because they don't value it, but because they don't recognize when they've skipped it. The result is a set of fairly predictable thinking errors. Let me describe a few to you. First would be treating relational issues as operational problems. So let's say the board notices tension in the organization. Maybe staff are coming across as being hesitant, or feedback isn't traveling too well. Important conversations may be happening in the corridors rather than in meetings. The board's instinct is understandable. They ask for clearer procedures and firmer accountability and more reporting. But the issue is relational. Those responses won't actually help. You can't proceduralize trust. You can't spreadsheet yourself into psychological safety. This is a classic misdiagnosis. A relational issue treated as an operational failure. The generative question the board skipped was not what should be tightened, but what is making open professional dialogue difficult right now? Let's look at another example, treating system problems as individual performance. Another familiar pattern. Something isn't working. Implementation is uneven, let's say. The same issues keep resurfacing. And the board starts looking for ownership. Who's accountable? Who's responsible? Who needs to step up? But if capable people are already working hard and the outcomes are still inconsistent, the problem might not sit with individuals at all. It may sit in the system itself. Misaligned processes, conflicting signals, structures that don't work. They work against one another. When boards personalize systemic issues, two things happen. First, individuals feel unfairly scrutinized, and the real problem remains untouched. The generative question that was skipped is, what patterns are we seeing across the organization, not who isn't delivering? A third example, treating strategic ambiguity as an execution problem. This one's particularly common. A board might sense some drift in the organization. Maybe initiatives don't gel, they don't cohere, and different teams interpret priorities differently. Energy might be high, but direction that's a little bit wishy-washy. The board responds by demanding clearer plans, more detail, more milestones, more structure. But if the issue is strategic at the team or system level, then planning harder won't fix it. What's missing is a shared meaning. People are acting reasonably just from different interpretations of what matters most. The generative question the board needs is not how do we implement this, but do we have a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve and why? And a fourth thinking error, assuming that urgency equals importance. Boards often operate under pressure. Limited time, high stakes, multiple demands. And in that environment, urgency has a certain gravity. But urgency is not the same as importance. When boards rush to action without framing the issue properly, they often create initiative fatigue, not progress. They look busy, they feel active, but coherence erodes. The skipped generative move is simply, before we act, what kind of issue is this? Across these examples, the pattern is the same. Boards default to action before orientation. They choose a governance stance, oversight or planning, etc., before agreeing on what kind of problem they're dealing with. This isn't a competence gap, it's a discipline gap. A simple diagnostic lens can help close that gap. So before asking what should we do, boards can pause and ask two quieter questions. First, where does this issue primarily sit? Is it at the level of an individual, a team, or the system? And what kind of work does it require? Does it require relational work, operational work, or strategic work? Those questions don't slow boards down, but they do stop boards from going in the wrong direction very quickly. So once an issue is properly framed, relational issues invite inquiry, not control. Operational issues invite coherence, not exhortation. And strategic issues invite alignment, not acceleration. At this point, boards will often say, this all makes sense, but in the moment, how do we catch ourselves? Because under pressure, boards don't lack intelligence, they lack a shared diagnostic pause. And that's where a simple framing tool can help. In the board deck, there's a deliberately practical lens boards use before moving into action. Two questions, that's it. First, where does this issue primarily sit? With an individual, with a team, or with a system? And second, what kind of work does it require? Relational work, operational work, or strategic work? Those two questions don't give answers. They give orientation, a sense of a center of gravity for where the issue is lying. And they stop boards from treating trust issues as compliance gaps, or treating system misalignment as individual failure, or treating a lack of shared meaning as poor execution. The deck isn't about slowing boards down, it's about preventing them from accelerating in the wrong direction. Once the issue is framed correctly, the right governance stance usually becomes obvious. Generative governance stops being abstract and starts becoming practical. Boards that build this habit notice something important. Meetings feel calmer, debate becomes less personal, and decisions carry more weight. Not because the board is doing more, but because it's thinking better, together, before acting. So if issues keep reoccurring, if governance feels reactive rather than intentional, or if there's a sense of worry that the board should be leaning in for fear that they are abdicating responsibility, the answer may not be a better plan. It may simply be this. The board needs to be better at recognizing what kind of problem it is that it's trying to solve. And in complex moments, this kind of restraint is not absence, it's precision. And remember, the board's job is not to solve the system, but to ensure the system is being seen clearly enough for the leadership to act. That's not hesitation, that's good governance.